Hello, my name is Emery Courtney, and my advocacy research paper is focusing on specialized reference services for Hispanic immigrants. Despite the controversy surrounding the issue of immigration in our country right now, library reference services should be provided for all immigrant populations, including Hispanic immigrants. Specialized reference services are necessary for new Americans regardless of their native country, but this argument will focus solely on reference services for Hispanic immigrants, since the influx of this population is a relevant and growing factor that Texas and all of America is currently facing. The specialized reference services that should be provided for this population include bilingual and bicultural librarians, ESL classes, information and/or resources and classes that provide tools for success in every aspect of life for new Americans, and the inclusion of Hispanic immigrants in the actual implementation and planning of library reference services for other immigrant populations and library patrons in general. Now, some groups believe that these services should not be made available for immigrant populations out of a fear of the unknown or a fear of the unfamiliar. Others believe that this immigrant population only creates economic burdens for our country. Both of these points will be diminished through the argument that specialized services for Hispanic immigrants are actually necessary and beneficial for our society and country as a whole. So, why exactly are specialized reference services necessary for the Hispanic immigrant population? These services are necessary for this community because there's often a language barrier between new and existing Americans. Spanish-speaking librarians are beneficial resources in the library for this exact reason. In order to assist Hispanic immigrants, the majority of whom, though not all, speak only or primarily Spanish, librarians must be able to communicate effectively with them. Burke claims that some Hispanic immigrants don't utilize library services due to language barriers, due partially to low education and literacy levels. While this research does not resemble every single Hispanic immigrant individual, since there are countless levels of education and literacy within this population, just as there are in any population, a bilingual librarian can make a world of difference in these services for Hispanic immigrants, especially those with lower educational or literacy skills. Burke furthers her discussion of the library service model of thought that encourages hiring bilingual and bicultural librarians, as well as including bilingual library resources, including pamphlets and computer interfaces. An employee who is fluent in Spanish would not only be able to better assist members of this community, but this employee would also be able to help members of this community feel comfortable using the library and its resources. Libraries would also be better equipped to serve Hispanic immigrants by providing access to bilingual collections and resources. With this in mind, a bilingual librarian and bilingual resources, some of which could be created by said librarian, would severely diminish the language barrier between Hispanic immigrants and librarians. Helping Hispanic immigrants learn English through ESL classes offered by the library would be beneficial for members of this community. Rather than simply expecting Hispanic immigrants to learn English on their own, librarians who speak both English and Spanish would be able to assist individuals in the often difficult journey of learning a new language. Especially considering the plight of Generation 1.5 individuals who can be described as native-born, non-native speakers, ESL classes held at the library could further assist these students who comprehend and speak both English and Spanish, but are not fluent in either language or have not received adequate skills in either language. The library could easily be a comfortable and safe space for all Hispanic immigrants to learn English without the pressures of society, or in the case of Generation 1.5 students, without the pressures of teachers, students, or the school in general. As we can see in some libraries within the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, ESL classes could provide English speakers who want to learn Spanish the opportunity to connect with Spanish speakers who are currently learning English. This sense of community bonding could also add to the feeling of comfort and safeness for Hispanic immigrants who choose to use the library's reference services. Along a similar thought process, Wang refers to the library as a neutral community resource center, which can be a helpful way to think of libraries and their ESL services for immigrant communities. Libraries can act as safety zones while Hispanic immigrants learn or enhance their English speaking skills without worrying about interference from different facets of American society. These reference services could also provide Hispanic immigrants with the tools to become effective members of society. Adkins, Sandy, and Durpick state that Latino immigrants need access to resources and information in order to effectively survive in our society. These resources and information include factual knowledge, such as where to get a job and how to enroll children in school. It also includes cultural knowledge, such as how to interact with police officers and when to become involved in children's schooling. Libraries could offer classes and information and resources on healthcare and health insurance, careers, job searches, resumes, and networking, technology, childcare, home ownership and renting, citizenship and naturalization, and schooling and education for themselves and their children. All of these areas are elements of basic self care and daily responsibilities that Hispanic immigrants, as well as Americans in general, come into contact with after moving and settling down in this country. As well, providing access to technology would further assist Hispanic immigrants in their information seeking behaviors as they venture to become successful members of society. Barron, Niels, and Gomez argue that technology not only provides this population with access to information and assists with their careers and future plans, but it also helps to cross the borders of time and space, allowing transitional experiences and notions of citizenship, as well as a sense of belonging and social integration, especially with regard to their incorporation into society through employment. By providing Hispanic immigrants with this information and access to technology, members of this community would be able to fully become a part of and contribute to our society. Continued communication and bonding with Hispanic immigrants could also open the door for members of this community to contribute their own expertise to library reference services. Adkins and Burns state that libraries should begin developing partnerships with other community organizations, getting the immigrant community involved in the library through collections and planning, and engaging in programs and outreach to attract new immigrants. Individuals could teach classes at the library on learning to speak and comprehend Spanish, introduce fellow patrons to their specific cultures and traditions, and provide information and resources about their careers or interests that they held while living in their native countries. While it is crucial for libraries to provide services specifically for members of this community, it is equally important for libraries to include Hispanic immigrants in the implementation of those library services, considering how these patrons could contribute to reference services in general. Through working with Hispanic immigrants to provide informative and worthwhile reference services for other patrons, members of this marginalized community would feel valued by their libraries and their communities. Furthermore, utilizing the information and contributions provided by this community in specialized reference services would also allow libraries to better serve the entire Hispanic immigrant population. This would also add to the comfortable and safe space mentioned above that the library has the possibility of providing for this population. Lastly, utilizing Hispanic immigrants in library services could attract other Hispanic immigrants or other immigrant populations to the library. Having someone on staff that deeply understands the immigrant experience is valuable for both the staff and the immigrant patrons who use the library. Thus, the inclusion of Hispanic immigrants in the implementation of specialized reference services is another critical aspect of serving this population. Immigration. Is it harmful or beneficial? Some individuals believe that immigration is not beneficial for our country as a whole due to a fear of the unknown or the unfamiliar. As stated by Maida, immigration may feed cultural and national identity worries driven by the belief that the set of values and traditions that characterize the receiving country's society are threatened by the arrival of foreigners. At the extreme, this type of concerns may just be the consequence of the dislike of anything which is different, that is, cultural and racial intolerance. End quote. Providing specialized reference services for the Hispanic immigrant community could be problematic for this group of citizens who are anti immigration. However, as Maida states, this unfounded fear encourages intolerance in our society that is constantly gaining new communities of people who have immigrated to our country. America does not have just one set of ideals or traditions. Our country is a melting pot of different people, cultures, ethnicities, traditions, beliefs, values, sexual orientations, genders, and personalities, just to name a few. Our world is a diverse one, so diversity should be embraced in a country that celebrates freedom and uniqueness. The cultures and traditions of Hispanic immigrants that may seem different to native born Americans are nothing to be frightened of or regarded with distaste. Learning about the individuals within this community, as well as learning about their backgrounds, is a simple way to dissuade a fear of the unknown or the unfamiliar. As well, learning about another person's culture and values does not demean one's own culture and values. Multiculturalism and differences can be discussed and celebrated by people without turning into a competition or a heated argument. With this information in mind, libraries working with Hispanic immigrants to provide information and classes on the various Hispanic cultures and traditions could lead to an alleviation of these anti-immigration and anti-immigrant sentiments. Immigrants. Do they create an economic burden? Some groups in our country consider Hispanic immigrant communities an economic burden on America as a whole. For instance, De La Croix and Nikiforov state some children of Spanish literate Mexican parents paradoxically end up illiterate in both English and Spanish. This fact imposes an extraordinary financial and organizational burden on some school districts. The authors further discuss this side of the issue by claiming that this form of illiteracy holds the other children back by hindering their educational experiences. While this form of illiteracy among individuals who have immigrated to our country and who speak a language other than English is possible and has been previously documented in these populations, specialized reference services offered to these populations could assist with this issue and even attempt to remedy it. ESL classes offered by libraries for adults and children, bilingual library employees and services, and extensive collections provided in both Spanish and English are all viable opportunities to remedy this form of illiteracy among Hispanic immigrant populations. The suggestion that allocating funds and resources to such programs would add to the economic burdens already brought about by Hispanic immigrant populations does not hold merit, considering the fact that funds needed for such programs would alleviate the need for economic assistance in schools for this particular form of illiteracy in the first place. This is not to say that schools do not require economic assistance, for they most certainly do. But if library reference services were specialized for this community of immigrants, then schools would not require as much financial assistance in order to alleviate the constraints brought about by this illiteracy amongst the children of Hispanic immigrants. Investing in the reference services mentioned would likely be a cheaper option, as well because one library would ideally serve all of the Hispanic immigrant children or the American-born children of those individuals in a large area rather than just the students of one particular school. Thus, specialized reference services for Hispanic immigrants could help alleviate the issue of illiteracy amongst the children within this population. In the end, specialized reference services that are provided by libraries for Hispanic immigrants are incredibly necessary in our country today, as they have also been in the past. Through providing bilingual library employees, offering ESL classes, providing classes and resources on aspects of daily life, and extending reference services to include the expertise of Hispanic immigrants, libraries can better serve the individuals within this often marginalized and constantly growing immigrant population. Dispelling notions of fear and ideas of economic burdens brought about by Hispanic immigrants both act as extensions of ways to better serve Hispanic immigrants, not to mention that this also helps create a more comfortable and safe environment for the members of this community. As a whole, the Hispanic immigrant population is included in the overarching goal of providing equitable services and access to information for all. Remembering the human side of the issue of immigration is key for librarians when arguing for specialized reference services for Hispanic immigrants. Thank you for your time.